Brendan Sorsby returning for his sophomore season for the Bearcats. And I think that Cincinnati has a chance to be a little bit better this season, maybe even push for a bowl game. But Sorsby's going to have a bunch of new wide receivers to throw to. So it's going to take a little while to begin to develop that chemistry. First up is a matchup with Nebraska at Arrowhead Stadium. Mini Patrick Mahomes playing in the Chiefs Stadium, certainly going to be a tough test for the Bearcats. And I do think that they have a chance to make this game close, but Nebraska is going to be a very solid team this year. And I do think that even though this is a neutral site game, that the Cornhuskers are really just the better team. They should be able to win this one by around 10 or so.
And it's not necessarily to discredit Cincinnati. They just lost so many guys from last year. Like Jonah said, the entire wide receiver room is basically new faces. The only returning receiver that Brendan Sorsby has is his lead tight end in Joe Royer, who's going to be the guy he leans on early on in the season while he begins to build those connections with the new wide receivers. And defensively, I do think Nebraska will be able to kind of expose some of the weaknesses that the Bearcats defense will have next season. The next two games, though, should be fairly easy. A home game against Bowling Green. Bowling Green was kind of decent last year when they had Harold Fannin Jr., but he was the bulk of their offense, and most of that offense from last season is now gone, as well as the defense. I really don't see Bowling Green being able to compete with the Bearcats, at least with Brennan Sorsby returning. This should be a fairly easy game here. And then Northwestern State should also be a very easy game before an early bye week in week 4.
And after that, it's the start of Big 12 play with a road trip to Kansas. The Jayhawks honestly should be very good this season. Jalen Daniels returning at the quarterback position. And again, there's a decent amount of hype around him that maybe he can finally pan out this season. I do think that there's a chance that he can actually be a really solid player. We just haven't seen it so far. There's been flashes, but this Kansas team has been on the up for a few seasons now. I think they're going to have a solid year, but the Big 12 is full of upsets, and Kansas is not immune to those by any means. I think the Bearcats get the better of them on the road early in the season.
And a big part of that could be the addition of Tawee Walker, the previous running back from Wisconsin who is joining the Bearcats. He had a pretty respectable season, and I do think his addition to this Bearcats offense will definitely be needed with the departure of Corey Kiner, who was in 1,000-yard back last season. They will need all the help they can get, though, hosting Iowa State after that win against Kansas. Iowa State returning Rocco back at the quarterback position. He did lose a good amount of his weapons to the NFL draft. Both of his lead wide receivers from last season getting drafted by the Texans. But I do think Iowa State will be one of the best teams in the Big 12 once again. With the return of Rocco back, I really don't see how Cincinnati will be able to compete with that level of offense, especially with the Cyclones coming off of the best season that they have had in recent memory. I think they will return to that form and get a win over Cincinnati here, but they will be back in the win column the following week against UCF. UCF lost their only weapon from last season in RJ Harvey to the NFL draft. He was a very underrated running back last season, but with his departure, this offense is going to be very, very difficult to predict. I really don't know a whole lot about this offense because so many of the projected starters are incoming transfers. I really don't see how UCF will be able to beat Cincinnati when they have at least a returning quarterback and a returning receiver in their starting tight end. Bearcats will move to 4-2 here.
And then it's a road trip to Oklahoma State. The Cowboys not expected to be very good this season. They didn't win a single game in Big 12 play last year. And this season, I think they're also going to struggle very heavily within the conference. this is a game that Oklahoma State has a slight chance in. The main reason here for us picking the Cowboys is that we just don't think they're going to be able to go two full seasons without winning a Big 12 conference game. And Cincinnati's probably the best case scenario there. Plus, they got a pretty good road environment there. There's some good reasons to actually pick Oklahoma State to defend the home field.
Following week against Baylor, the Bears are looking to improve upon their season last year, ending their year on a 6-game win streak before falling to LSU in their bowl game. And they're bringing back a lot of the starting production from last year. Sawyer Robertson back at quarterback. Both of their running backs are also returning after incredible seasons in their freshman and sophomore seasons. And they have Josh Cameron returning as well to be their lead wide receiver. The defense lost a couple key players to the NFL draft, particularly in the linebacker department, but I still think Baylor's defense is going to be very good. And they're my personal dark horse pick in the Big 12 to maybe make a run for the conference title. Jonah is high on them as well, but not as much as I am. His team is more Texas Tech, but I do think Baylor is going to be the overall better team compared to Cincinnati, the more complete team, and that's ultimately why they're going to get the win.
And then it's a road trip to Utah. The Utes finally moving on from Cam Rising. They got Devin Dampier from New Mexico in the transfer portal. He's a really solid dual threat guy. And I think that this Utes offense is going to be incredibly potent this season. I believe that they are going to be a really solid team once again, a big improvement over that 4-8 season that we saw last year. They were 5-7, a big improvement over that 5-7 season that we saw last year that was just so uncharacteristic for a team led by Kyle Whittingham. I think that the Utes are, unfortunately for Cincinnati, a significantly better team. They will pick up this win heading into the bye week. And then it's Arizona. Noah Fafita back at quarterback, but his number one weapon in Tateroa McMillan is gone as he was a first round pick in the NFL draft. Fafita is going to have to get a new number one target, and that's going to take a little bit of time. By this point in the season, I think that he'll have been able to do it, but will he be as good as he was last year? His freshman season was better than the sophomore year. Is the sophomore season going to be better than his junior year? If so, I think Arizona's going to struggle quite a bit. I could see a team like Cincinnati pulling off an upset against them pretty easily.
The next matchup is against BYU, and recently BYU quarterback Jake Retzlaff announced that he was planning to enter the transfer portal after facing a potential 7-game suspension for violating the honor code stemming from his civil lawsuit. Now that lawsuit was ultimately dropped, but the suspension was very likely to still occur. So with Retzlaff's departure, BYU is now turning to their quarterback room to see who is likely to be their starter for next season. They have 3 guys that they are thinking about, one of them being a true freshman that has a lot of hype around him, but might not be the starter out of the gate compared to the other 2 that have some experience at the college level already. Regardless, the weapons BYU has on offense, along with having a defense with so much returning production after being one of the best defenses in the Big 12 last year, it will not matter who the starting quarterback is. BYU is still going to be one of the best teams in the Big 12, even with Retzlaff's departure. Cincinnati might be able to hang around early on, especially with it being at home, but I do think overall the Cougars will get the job done.
And then it's a road trip to TCU. Josh Hoover returning at the quarterback position, a guy who had very similar stats to Garrett Nussmeier last year. And if you've been following anything that we've said about TCU, you'd know that we're pretty high on Josh Hoover. I do think that there's really no reason he shouldn't be in this early Heisman conversation with guys like Nussmeier when he did basically the same thing that Garrett did last year, just with not as good of wide receivers. And the difference maker is TCU's wide receivers are mostly all gone. I believe they brought back one guy. He wasn't one of the top guys that they had last season, had only a couple hundred yards. However, I do think that because Josh Hoover's a solid quarterback, that he's going to be able to connect with his new wide receivers pretty well. By this point in the season, I mean, it's the last week. They should have a pretty good relationship going, and I do think that TCU is going to be a much better team than Cincinnati. And unfortunately for the Bearcats, will block them from making a bowl game. Now, our way too early projection was 5.8 wins. We had Cincinnati going 4-8. The prediction has come up to 5-7, but the projection dipped just slightly by zero point zero 0.05 wins down to 5.75, 3.45, and 5.55 in Big 12 play. The floor for the Bearcats going to be 3-9, 1-8 in conference play. And the ceiling, if everything goes perfectly, Brendan Sorsby has an incredible season, improving even more than he did last year. Maybe Cincinnati can actually get up to a bowl game, going 7-5 overall, 5-4 in conference play. That would be adding a couple wins, maybe one over Oklahoma State, I think is a pretty good possibility for them to win, or even Utah potentially. I do really like this Utah team though, so it's tough to say there. It could be either 4 or 5 conference wins, depending on if they can pull off an upset against Nebraska potentially as well. But there's multiple ways for Cincinnati to get to this 7-5 record. So thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video.